Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this Disability Vote Summit. We are really excited for everyone to be here to have this conversation all together about how we're going to break down barriers to the ballot this year and beyond. My name is Lillian Alluri. I am the Rev Up Voting Campaign Coordinator at the American Association of People with Disabilities. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers. My visual description is that I am a medium brown skin multiracial woman. I'm wearing a black floral top. I have dark hair pulled back with bangs. I'm wearing gold earrings, and behind me are some windows, bookshelf, a mirror, all against kind of off-white walls. Before we dive into talking about the event and talking about some logistics for how to access the captions and ASL interpreters and things like that, I'm going to pass it over to my fellow MC, who I'm honored to be here with, Andrew Polrang, to introduce himself.
Okay, hi, I'm Andrew Polrang, and I am a disability-based freelance writer and co-founder of Crypt the Vote. And I am a white man with short brown hair and glasses. I'm wearing a gray shirt, and behind me is random walls of my apartment. So yeah, and I'm very glad to be here and co-hosting this.
Great, this is Lillian. Thank you, Andrew. So again, we are here to launch the 2-day virtual Disability Vote Summit. This is actually our 3rd annual virtual summit focused on how we can work together to build the power of the disability vote. And so in a little bit, Andrew is going to share a little bit more about what this event is going to look like, what to expect over the next 2 days. Before Andrew does that, I'm going to share a little bit about the logistics for the webinar to make sure everyone can access the event. And we do have a question in the chat that I want to answer. Darren Bates asks, what is the hashtag for this event? So I'm going to put that hashtag in the chat. It is, oh, there we go. Robin's got it. DisVote Summit 22. So both the American Association of People with Disabilities and the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities will be live tweeting today. So follow that hashtag and join in the conversation with your own thoughts. All right, so to start on some of our logistics for today's and tomorrow's summits. So we will have 2 ASL interpreters that should be visible on screen. They will be switching off between each other. So there should always be 1 ASL interpreter visible in the Zoom window. We are sharing a slide right now. We'll be having different slideshows shared throughout the summit. And so if you are an attendee and for some reason you can't view the ASL interpreter when we're sharing slides, you may need to go to the upper right corner of your screen and change the view to side-by-side view. And you can choose side-by-side gallery view. That will enable you to see all of the spotlighted speakers, including the ASL interpreter. And then you can also adjust the size of the screen using the slider in the center. We also have live captioning provided in both English and Spanish. Our English captions are cart captioning that's available directly in Zoom and through stream text. And then we have automated Spanish captions available at that same stream text link. So I shared this in the chat earlier. I'm going to share it again right now so that y'all have access to it. Here in the chat right now is the link, the stream text link for English and Spanish stream text captions. And to access the English cart captions in Zoom, you'll need to click on the live transcript or closed captions button so that you can view the captions. We will also have Spanish audio available. To access the Spanish audio translation of the content today, select interpretation at the bottom of your screen and choose listen to the event in Spanish. You'll be able to choose between English and Spanish audio. All right. If you are having any issues accessing the ASL captioning or Spanish interpreting or any other technical issues, there are a couple of things you can do. So first, we would encourage you to check out Zoom support resources, which can answer some questions that you might have. And so I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. If you can't find a solution on that webpage, or you're having, maybe an access issue with Zoom, you can also use the chat function to chat the hosts and panelists. And Robin Troutman will be helping us with tech and making sure that that we can address whatever issue you're facing. You can also email Robin at rtroutman@nacdd.org if you're not able to use the chat function. So I'm going to put that information again in the chat as well, so that you have that available. All right. Okay. So I'm seeing that someone doesn't have access to side by side. So Robin, I'm going to let you see if we can make sure that the ASL interpreter is visible for that individual. Pardon me. All right. Okay. So a couple more notes that I have is that during today's and tomorrow's sessions, we are just going to have a couple of we're going to have a couple of opportunities during the summit for some engagement with y'all as the audience, some opportunity for question and answer time. And so specifically today, during our second session that's going to start soon after 2 p.m. Eastern, that will have some time at the end for for a Q&A with the speakers there. So you'll be able to enter your questions through the Q&A box. You may also be able to email Robin Troutman at the same email that we provided earlier. And just as a note, we will not be using we will not be using the chat for a lot of conversation between the audience members, so that we can kind of keep that chat clear for any resources that the speakers want to share, anything that that we want to share with y'all to make sure that you can access today's event. And so with that, one quick note as well, we are going to have a recording of today's event to share afterwards with all of you. We will also have a transcript that we'll share afterwards as well. So if you can't stay for the whole summit, which is completely understandable, you will be able to check back and check out maybe a session that you weren't able to attend. And I mentioned this really briefly just a couple minutes ago, but if you are on Twitter, if you're on social media, we would love to join in the conversation with you. I know that my colleague, Jess, who's our communications director at AAPD, is going to be on Twitter sharing some reflections on what's happening today, announcing the different sessions. So if you're on social media, if you're on Twitter, which I am actually not, we definitely encourage you to engage because that's going to be where a lot of the conversation is. So I am looking forward to checking that out after the event and just seeing what y'all have to say. What are some things that are kind of really feeling really important that you're taking away from today's event?
Hello.
And I'm going to put, sorry, I am going to just share the hashtag in the chat real quick. It is again, hashtag #DisVoteSummit22. And with that, I am going to hand it over to my co-MC Andrew to kind of open up today's session, today's summit.
Okay, thanks, Lillian. So I think the purpose of this has been well stated already, so I won't really go over it. So we can, we're a little behind, I guess, but basically we're going to be having we're going to have 6 sessions over 2 afternoons, plus opening and closing remarks on each day, starting today. And could I have the first agenda slide, please? Okay. So our three topics for today are a panel on why we vote, a presentation on making voting more accessible, and then another panel on partnering for success. And so that'll be day one. And as I say, there'll be some breaks and opening and closing remarks in both at the beginning and end as well. On the second day, could I get the second slide? Great. Our second day tomorrow, starting at the same time, 1 o'clock Eastern time, will be a panel on protecting access to voting, a presentation on making voter outreach more accessible, and a presentation on motivating voters for the upcoming midterms. And all of these sessions will be featuring a diverse group of disabled and allied disability activists. So I think they're all have a lot of experience and have a lot to say that I think will be useful for everyone. And if you want to see the full agenda, you can always go to bit.ly/disvotesummit22. That's bit.ly/disvotesummit22. And that's you can always refer to the full agenda if you're not sure what's coming next. And we'll try to keep you all oriented for that. So at this point, I figure we could just go ahead and get started with, we have first a pre-recorded opening address video from the leaders of the three main organizations who put this two-day event together. And the first you'll hear from is Kurt Decker, the executive director of the National Disability Rights Network. And in the video, he appears as a white man with gray hair and wearing glasses. Then you'll hear Donna Meltzer, CEO of the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. And in the video, she presents as a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. And finally, Maria Town, president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities. And in her part of the video, she appears as a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. So I think we're ready for that video and we get that going, and then we'll come back afterwards. Can we get that started?
Absolutely.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kurt Decker, Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network. We are proud to once again partner with the American Association of People with Disabilities and the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities to bring you the Disability Vote Summit. We'd like to thank everyone who helped make this event possible, including our amazing speakers, our MCs, our partner organizations, and of course, our funders. The generous support of our funders makes events like this and so much of the voting work we do possible. At this critical juncture in our country, we must ensure that voters with disabilities are part of the political process. Candidates need to know that people with disabilities are a large constituency who have the power to swing an election. They cannot be ignored. And we need to ensure voters and organizers alike know how to navigate the barriers that this community faces. Thank you again for being part of this event. It's a great opportunity for you to learn more about the work that we all do to protect voting rights, get out the vote, and all that still needs to be done. Together, we can close the turnout gap among voters with disabilities and make the process of casting a ballot fully accessible. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Donna Meltzer, CEO of the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities, NAACD. Thank you for being at this very important Disability Vote Summit. I'm thrilled that you have chosen to take the time to participate and welcome you to the summit on behalf of myself and all of NAACD. At NAACD, we believe that every person, regardless of ability, health status, cultural heritage, race, gender, religion, or socioeconomic status, has the right to vote and should take every opportunity to exercise their right to vote. At NAACD, we are committed to doing our part to help people cast their ballot. We are well aware of the barriers and challenges that exist and know that many barriers keep people away from voting. We have seen great strides in more accessible opportunities for voting, such as mail-in ballots or extended voting hours that allow people to get to the polls after work hours or in locations closer to their home. But we also continue to see pushback in states and false claims that these accessible options are fraudulent or not even necessary. We have come here today to discuss those barriers and strategize together on how we can together overcome these barriers. You all know that voters with disabilities face unique challenges when they go to the polls to vote, despite being one of the largest minorities of eligible voters in America. Any additional restrictions that are put in place, even if they aren't targeted at the disability community, often impact people with disabilities the hardest. Political campaigns do not typically court the disability vote. They are rarely aware that this is a huge voting bloc and that people with disabilities want to know what candidates are including in their platforms that will help them achieve their best life, such as equitable healthcare, employment opportunities, and inclusive communities. Candidates must learn how to communicate in plain language and meet with constituents with all kinds of disabilities, including intellectual and developmental disabilities. We need to motivate our voters, but we also need to teach those running for office and those administering elections how to make the political process inclusive for everyone. This 2022 Disability Vote Summit, which you have chosen to participate in, is giving you the opportunity to join with leading voting rights experts, grassroots activists, and members of the National Disability Rights Network, along with the DD Council Network and others, to discuss how to motivate people with disabilities to participate in the midterm elections. It is my hope that over these 2 days of the summit, you will listen, learn, and engage with your peers to help all of us do what we can to encourage more people with disabilities to cast their ballots for this 2022 midterm election. This midterm election is critically important, as this will determine who will lead our U.S. House of Representatives and who will lead our Senate. This election sets the stage for what will happen with our elections in 2024. No matter who you choose to vote for, it is your right to participate in the process and to be assured that accessibility is adhered to in the process. I want to thank NDRN, the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, and all who worked so hard to put this event together. And thanks to all of the presenters who I know will inspire us over the course of these 2 days. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for making time to join the Disability Vote Summit today. My name is Maria Town, and I serve as the President and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities, or AAPD. AAPD is a national cross-disability civil rights organization that works to increase the economic and political power of all disabled people across the United States. At AAPD, we run an initiative called Rev Up. Rev Up stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. And through Rev Up, we work to increase voter registration of disabled people, remove barriers to the polls, and ensure that politicians and elected officials across the country know of key disability issues in every community. This is the third year that we have been a part of the Disability Vote Summit, gathering organizers and advocates from across the country. We're proud to see the conversation growing around the importance of the power of the disability vote. I'll be honest with you, it can be hard to keep your faith in democracy when our right to vote is continually attacked by legislators who don't want multiply marginalized folks to have a voice in the policies that shape their lives. When a few at the top can take away the right to bodily autonomy for millions and millions of Americans, and when we don't see adequate representation of disability in our elected leaders. 2 out of 3 disabled voters believe that leaders in Washington don't care about people with disabilities, and it's not hard to see why. We know what needs to change, and we've known it for years. People with disabilities must have access to the ballot, We must be represented at every level of government and have a say in the people and policies that shape our lives. This is the change we are working towards, and this is why we are meeting with hundreds of you virtually from every corner of the nation during this summit. Whether you are watching live on Zoom, going to watch the recorded event, or going to participate on Twitter, we hope that you will join us in planning for how we will make our democracy more equitable, inclusive, and representative, to make our nation one that works for the over 61 million disabled people in the US. Thank you to our partners, the National Disability Rights Network and the National Association for Councils on Developmental Disability, for making this happen. Thank you to our speakers who represent organizations and communities from all over, who will each share so much value with us during today's event. Again, thank you all for joining, and please let us know your thoughts using the hashtags RevUp, CryptTheVote, and GOTV 2022. Thanks again. Rev up and lead on.
Thank you very much, Kurt and Donna and Maria, for that great introduction. So now we will begin with our first panel, which is titled Why We Vote. Unfortunately, the original moderator, Mia Ives Rudley of the Center for American Progress, couldn't be with us today. So the moderator instead will be Zan Thornton, grassroots organizer for Disability Justice of Georgia and Georgia Adapt. And the other panelists will be Vera Mendoza of the Ability Center of Greater Toledo and Lauren Gherkin, policy analyst with the Texas Developmental Disabilities Council. And the panel is scheduled to end at 2:02, but I don't know if we're going to hold to that or not. We're running a little bit behind, but I guess our producer can interrupt if we need to end a little bit early. So with that, over to you, Zan, for the panel.
Thank you so much. I'm Zan Thornton. My sign name is Z, as in Zorro. Appreciate y'all being here and appreciate the almost 300 people that are on the call right now, the Zoom, on just Zoom. That's fabulous. I'd like to start off just introducing ourselves and visually describing what I have on, and then I'll pass it over to Vera and Lauren. I am a white passing Cherokee veteran with disabilities with I think it's a maroon vest and a maroon paisley tie and a gingham blue shirt. I'm, as I said, white passing. I have kind of a mohawk and no hair on the side. So how about Lauren or Vera? Can you go ahead?
Hello, I am Lauren Goodkin, and Zan said I am a public policy analyst for the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. I am a white woman with very short red hair and wearing a full shirt with red, blue, and a little bit of brown, and a red blazer.
Thank you, Zan. My name is Vera Mendoza. I am based in the Toledo, Ohio area. I am part of the Ability Center of Greater Toledo, and I am wearing a blue dress. It's different shades of blue, but you can mostly see the top. I am an Afro-Latina. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am tan, brown skinned, have short black hair, and I am wearing black eyeglasses and gold earrings that look like little faces. And I am in my home office. You can see some books behind me. Thank you for having us here, Zan, and to all the hosting organizations.
Thank you both, and thank the visitors. It's almost one away from 300 now. Later in this panel, we're going to talk about why we vote. But before we do, can we talk about how breaking down barriers to the ballot has happened before the summit or during the summit or in the past years. We know that states have worked to exclude disabled, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, and other voters on the ballot. So my question is, what has it looked like in your communities? And how are you making sure that disabled voters can still have the right to vote? Jump in as you like.
Jared, do you want to go first?
Sure. So in the state of Ohio, the legislature has been focused on different topics that feel like maybe they're not related to voting access, right? It feels more like there are barriers, or rather conversations about avoiding so-called, voter fraud. But we are having to look at that realistically. We know that voter fraud actually happens in a very small amount. It's a very small percentage. And we know that the reality is that people with disabilities are the most affected by policies and laws that are really just creating these barriers to the ballot. And we're talking from physical access to the ballot to figurative access, right? Even requiring more IDs, to requiring more proof, almost that you are you, and you have to be there present physically for some of that, all the way to the voting machines, right? What kind of voting machines we can use. So in the state of Ohio, we are facing some of that. Lauren, I don't know what it's looking like for Texas.
So we are definitely facing similar barriers in Texas, as well as breaking down barriers goes in the past, and that continues. We have a very strong group of advocates in Texas who do a lot of work to support each other and try to make their voices heard. So Disability Rights Network has really great trainings and really great staff that work hard to draw out as much information as they possibly can on accessible voting, what your rights are, and how to reach the hotline and the information if something goes wrong. And voting at the disability rights location is highly accessible and a place where you can go get really any support that you could possibly think of. And like I said, that team there's a lot to support people. The UNC chapters across the state, and DD Council, obviously, we are doing everything in our power to produce helpful information for self-advocates going in the polls, but also the people running these networks, running into information, and trying to ensure that they're as educated as they possibly can about what the rights are and what disability it looks like. Because I think there is an assumption that it's not just in voting of what disability is. A lot of people know deaf, blind, and wheelchairs, but people walk in to a polling location with all kinds of support needs that a poll worker might not be familiar with. So as a large disability population in Texas, we are really encouraging people to educate each other as much as possible, and trying to get people who understand disability and understand, support, and diversity to actually get involved in being poll workers and watchers and volunteering as much as possible so that we have as many allies working in the system as we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Lauren. The next question, and I will answer the questions in a little bit. My answers kind of combine all questions together. So the next question is, when we think about why we vote, democracy itself is the key issue. Our lives are at stake. How do our votes impact the future? How does it impact the future of democracy? Vera?
Yeah, I think one obvious way that voting affects the future of democracy is, for example, redistricting, right? We know that in redistricting, it's the very politicians that are sent to a committee to take care of those maps. And what those maps look like for the next 10 years will then, set or really create the setting in which we organize. So the voting, is one aspect of advocacy, and the organizing can only happen in a certain political climate, and it is set by that voting. So we know that in the state of Ohio, there has been a back and forth. The Ohio Supreme Court sided with, or actually I should say, the Supreme Court let Ohio legislators know that the map was unconstitutional and was not going to work. Somehow it is still being implemented for the midterms, but not for 2023. And so all of that really can confuse any voter. So if it can confuse, people that are on the inside keeping track and who are passionate about voting and passionate about advocacy, your everyday person who goes to vote because, maybe their cousin is, always bugging them, or they have a parent who's saying, it's important to do so. Imagine how much more confusing that becomes, right? Or for a first-time voter. And that could be, a young person, or it could be an immigrant. I was mentioning to our panel here before that I am a new U.S. citizen, even though I have been here for 2 decades. Thank you. And so I am a new voter. I just got to vote this year for the first time. And if it weren't for the fact that I always keep my eye open and keep my eye on these things, I maybe wouldn't know who I would be voting for and what they stand for. So it really is important that we vote, that we do research, that we share that research with each other, that we look at how people have voted or supported people with disabilities in their communities or via legislation if they have held office before. And really important that we help guide each other through this process as our districts change. So Lauren, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. I just want to echo almost everything you said. We also dealing with redistricting and trying to understand what that means for everyone. When redistricting happens, a lot of times what we're seeing with our network and people who have worked with a particular legislator for a long time now all of a sudden have a new legislator. And that relationship that they built with their legislator for which they are a constituent, now they have to go do that all over again with somebody new. And as frustrating as that can seem, we're trying to help people see that it's an opportunity to educate somebody new. You still have that relationship, that legislator is still there, but now you get to work with somebody new. So that's kind of a silver lining with districting that happens. In terms of why we vote, there's a personal level and a broader level here. So we vote because it is the foundational right to all American citizens who may be wondering, who am I and what can I do about what I'm seeing? And you might not be a decision maker at a higher level yet. We can all do that eventually if we want to. But at a foundational level, we are all decision makers and we all have autonomy in that way. So everyone who can vote can be involved in the democratic process. And for a long time, historically, people have been told, particularly people with disabilities, you have no voice. You don't get to be involved at any level. And we're really trying to show people, yes, you do. You have a voice, you have that right, and you can be just as involved as everybody else. And trying to shift that perspective for people. That was a very strong message that TCD tried to get across during a special session when we were working on voting legislation that was going through, trying to get legislators to understand that any perception that a disabled person is incapable or not worthy of voting is false. On a personal level, I have seen, myself be very active in voting and carrying people along with me. My parents are a very strong example of folks who didn't vote for years. And as I started voting and working and voting legislation, painting the picture of how important this is. We are a family of very diverse people. We have multiple LGBTQ people, we have a disabled person, we have Hispanic and Latino people. So we are a group of minorities, and everyone in our family who can vote should be voting. So they've kind of seen, okay, our kids doing it, we should be doing it too. And seeing people who are disabled, who have never voted before in their lives because they grew up being told, you cannot vote, you're not worth the vote. See me going out and voting and thinking, okay, well, she's disabled, she is going, why am I not going? So there's, that whole conversation that bleeds into seeing people matter. As we go out and we vote more and more as disabled people, we're going to be encouraging more people to get involved who may not have ever seen someone like them do this before, and are now realizing that we all have that right and that responsibility to, again, be involved in decision making at that fundamental level.
Wow. We sound like we have overlapping issues that all our states are working on and our advocates are working on. For me, why we vote actually is tied to my next question, or to the questions that was given, is that COVID continues to be a pressing issue, including people with disabilities. How would the votes impact the future of our communities with the pandemic and impacts? And I wanted to back up just a second that Georgia Adapt, our group, we had to wait 6 hours to to voting in 2020, 6 hours. And it's so hard to wait in line. And I'm lucky that I have a car, but my friend Jessica got paratransit and went to her polling place. And the polling place says, no, this is not the right place. So had she gone on voting the day that the vote, not early voting, she couldn't get a ride. The transit wouldn't take her to the next poll because they have other rides set up. So we have a double whammies that the way the system's applied, systematic racism, ableism, colonialism, and that such. So COVID motivated me to help with the runoff, and we ended up getting 2 senators that represent disability rights and people of color, which is really grateful. But in ours, in ADAPT nationwide, we've lost 30 people, and the majority of them are people of color, and the attendants were nearly 100% people of color. So COVID, disability is not just disability people, but it, like Lauren said, the family, Vera said the community. We have a big community to impact. So how will y'all address it? And one last thing is that when we did our runoff, we had a van and we could go pick up people in the rural areas. And that Rev Up and ARC helped have grassroots connectors. So people with disabilities were driving people with disabilities to the polls to get their ballots, to drop off the ballots and such. But Georgia does not have a clean record here. And I hope we can learn from y'all. Either one of y'all.
Yeah. So for the 2020 election, I was not with the Ability Center, but I was with the Ability Center for a local election that we were holding for, and it was a countywide issue, and it was to switch a tax so that we could expand transportation countywide, and it passed, which is wonderful. But of course, questions came up about funding that had come from the state, but that the county just simply didn't accept to make things more accessible. Why not? They just chose to not accept that additional money. We, also had a colleague of mine who is blind. Luckily, her daughter was with her, so she read the questions to her, but otherwise she wouldn't have been able to vote. So all of these, not only was this particular election really important to us as a group of, grassroots organization focusing on transportation, there's just all these little things, right? Like people, the Board of Election had the choice to take this additional funding, and they just didn't. They just didn't want to take on this additional work. And with COVID, it's more important now than ever to get people in and out. We don't know who's immunocompromised. We don't know who has the physical ability to stand in line or not. We don't know if somebody's diabetic. Maybe they need access to food or to water, whatever that might look like. And we also need to make sure that absentee voting and voting by mail is still a reality for people. So a lot of that happened right with COVID-19. We saw how voting by mail had a huge impact. And we need to keep that going no matter what, right? Because right now it's COVID, but 50 years down the line, it could be a different virus, and we need to make sure future generations have access to voting no matter what, regardless of whether they can leave their home or not. It could be another crisis in 25 years. We really don't know what things could look like. And we need to make sure that that we have that full access. I lost family due to COVID-19, and just knowing that that there are always ways to make things even a little bit better to reduce even a little bit of that exposure is a big step, I think.
Again, I echo almost everything you said. I'm gonna back up way back a little bit. and on top from both experience as a disabled voter in 2016. It was my first election that I was allowed to vote in, and I was so excited to vote and get involved. And I used a mail-in ballot. I signed it and shipped it off, and I said, yes, I'm being involved. I'm helping, I won't say high voting, but I felt like I was helping to, a lot of my rights and the rights of people that I loved. And 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail from and saying that my ballot was rejected because my signatures did not match. So, I have cerebral palsy. My signatures never match, no matter what I do in my life. And for me, that felt like my country saying, you don't matter because you are different. And I got that letter and I just cried and cried. And I remember people saying it was just one vote. It didn't really matter, and having that really knocked me down. And it was very, detrimental for a while. So fast forward to 2020, a raging pandemic is going on. And I had to make that decision. I said, okay, I can either risk my vote, doing a mail-in ballot, knowing that it will likely be rejected because my signature is not going to be the same, or I can risk my life by going to the poll and voting in person. And I made the decision to go in person because for me, my vote was more important than anything else. So I managed up, I went and voted, and it went pretty well. But in the later conversations about legislation that was going through in our legislative session, the conversation about signatures and signature change were very important, and I realized through my work that I was not the only one who dealt with that. Many people with disabilities do not have matching signatures ever in their life. And trying to work on the signature change process that happens here in Texas so that one, it happens timely, because technically what is supposed to happen if your signature doesn't match is you're supposed to get notification almost immediately. And if you do a mail-in ballot before the early voting, you have time to go in and verify your identity. That did not happen for me for whatever reason. But trying to really confirm and affirm the fact that if a person with a disability is using a mail-in ballot, they likely do it because going in somewhere is too difficult. And so having to go in anyway to verify your identity is not always an option for somebody. Pandemic or no pandemic, there are people who are going to be dealing with this when if life goes back to normal. So trying to figure out other options that really support mail-in ballots for people who find traveling too difficult and almost impossible. And trying to get signature stamps accepted as a valid way to sign your name. It's a very popular tool for people with disabilities who don't sign. And as of right now, it's not accepted method of signature. So we're still working on that because, you know, what we saw is the tools that were developed during COVID that allowed for distance and virtual and all of that work really are what people with disabilities have been fighting for decades. You know, needing to do things from a distance is nothing new. What's new is, oh, everybody needs it now. So now we're going to make it work and trying to keep those tools in place, keep those protections in place, and broaden them with the understanding that isolation, social distancing, medical needs, having them stay at home for some people is never going to go away.
Thank you so much. We have about 6 minutes left, but we actually have another question. But I wanted to summarize that these advocates, Vera and Laura and myself, have come up with different ways, working with coalitions, to help people go vote. Making people aware of the systematic racism, colonialism, talking about people with disabilities and their signatures. We've talked about a little legalese going on because, like Georgia, Texas was going to copy our bill from Georgia. It's called Senate Bill 202. It's a bill that discriminated against disabled people and people of color. And luckily, Georgia adapts part of that. We're the only grassroots group that's involved with that, run by and for grassroots. But there's a lot of different ways to help people get out the vote. One of the things we did is we've bought a van. It holds 10 wheelchairs, and I know how to use a lift. And that we're going to go to the rural areas and help Native Americans with disabilities and other people in the rural areas to get out and vote. We did that at the runoff. And like Lauren said, that runoff with the mail-in and the drop-off ballots, that was the most accessible we've seen. It's not perfect, but Georgia was told by the disability community, this machine works for access. And what did Georgia do? The opposite. So we've got legal, we've got advocacy, we've got communities, we've got centers for independent living, private groups, nonprofit groups. Is there other issues that you want us to be aware of in the last couple of minutes? What do you think is the most important issue for voters right now?
So in Texas, for people with disabilities, we have new legislation in place that is going into effect before the November election that limits the support that they can get from a support person. And we have a new oath that an ancestor needs to take before offering support that limits severely the kind of support that they can get. So we are trying to work on information output of what's protected under federal law and what kind of support people can get. Because as a poll watcher, if you are watching somebody get support, you might look at it and compare to what's written down on paper and say that person is breaking the law in the way that they're offering support and report them, and that person can get in serious trouble now for breaking that rule. And trying to ensure that people are still able to get access to support in general, because due to the recent legislation and the language sent in there, offering support in somebody, offering assistance has now become a scary, unnerving thing to do, because you are not sure if you're going to get in trouble, if you're going to end up paying fines or so we're trying to make sure that people still have access to that help, and that the people providing that help and watching this happen know exactly what's allowed and what things might look like.
Vera, thank you.
So going back to your question, when you said, issue, I definitely think what Lauren brought up about, ideas on a federal level, to have like Lauren mentioned, poll watchers, to have folks that are ensuring that rights are not, being that people's rights are being respected. I lost my wording there for a second. But when you said issue, I thought of like political issue. And of course, we don't live single issue lives, right? Someone like me who is Black, immigrant, queer, disabled, and, assigned female at birth. There are multiple identities that leave me sort of at the margins of society, right? I can be passed up for many things in society. So when we're talking about issues, we're thinking about issues. I know that when we think of accessibility from the beginning, usually nobody else even feels the impact of that, right? Like this is one small example in society. When we make a building with no steps, people that can walk, that that could normally go up some steps, won't even notice that the step is missing. But wheelchair users and anybody that uses a mobility device will notice and will have access to that space, right? So when we start with accessibility, when we start with intersectionality at the middle, we make sure that everybody can get in through that door, and not only get in through that door, but be at the table with us, right? So we're not saying, I think what a lot of people think of with disabilities is either that we want charity or pity, and we don't, right? We just want full access to our rights. And I think also when we talk about, issues of just having even access to this voting, we tend to look at it as all are welcome. And that is a very kind sentiment, but there's a difference between all are welcome and this was made with you in mind. So we need to call our legislators to be accountable to that. We need to call our Board of Elections to be accountable to that. This was made with you. This was made with the most vulnerable, with the most marginalized in mind, to make sure that you are the first that look through this and say this is good. Everybody else will then have full access. So I hope that when we're voting, I know that I'm looking at this, but for anybody that's, all participants that are here with us, when you're voting, I hope that's what you look at. I hope that you see that the most marginalized are going to need that access in many ways, right? And when we do that, we honestly open the door for everybody else behind us too.
That's great. That's fabulous. Thank you so much for being on the panel. Thank you for all your hard work back in your states. One person can make a difference. Vera has, Laura has, other people have. So if you have questions, we're in the bios. Contact us. Thank you, thank you for this panel, and I'm turning it back over to y'all. Thanks. To Andrew.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks a lot to Zan, Vera, and Lauren for your professional and very personal perspectives on why voting is so important for disabled people. I really appreciated all of what you had to say. I hope everyone else did too. So now we're going to have a 5-minute break until about 2:08 or so, when Lillian Alluri will come back and introduce our next session. So until then, be back in a few.
Hello, everyone. This is Lillian Alluri. It is 2:10 Eastern, and so we are going to go ahead and come back from this break. If you've gone away from your whatever you're viewing the webinar on, you can take a minute to come back to us. All I can say is, wow, what a great way to start off the summit with that session. It has been. It was just really awesome to get to hear from the different speakers about their experiences, about what's important to them as they think about voting. I'll be taking 2 days off from my I'm not on Twitter stance. And so I've been checking out all the conversation on Twitter. And so I highly recommend that y'all do the same. I've just shared in the chat about a minute ago the hashtag again, DisVote Summit. Oh, sorry, I put it in wrong. It's DisVote Summit 22. And so there's lots of folks kind of sharing some quotes that are sticking out to them and that are meaningful from the conversation that we just had. All right, okay, so we are going to move on to our next session. Our next session is going to be a great and sort of practical workshop on how to make elections more accessible. And so we've got our slide up just with our introduction, our title for the session. This is our second session, session 2. We have our 3 speakers who will each speak one after each other and share a different insight on making elections more accessible, particularly for disabled voters and especially multiply marginalized communities. And so our first speaker is Peter Steffen of Disability Rights DC at University Legal Services. Peter will be speaking about voting access specifically from prisons and jails and some work that they've done to make voting more accessible in those circumstances. And so the second speaker that we have is Fred Neeson, who is managing attorney of the Voting Rights Practice Group at Disability Rights California. And so Fred will talk to us about a couple of access issues when it comes to voting, but particularly voting for folks that are in congregate settings and how we can make sure that these folks have access to voting as well. There are just different barriers to consider in each of these scenarios. And then the last speaker that we have for this next session is Sylvia Albert, Director of Voting and Elections at Common Cause. And so Sylvia will be talking to us specifically about election protection and how that plays a role in expanding and protecting access and making our elections more accessible. So with that, I'm going to welcome our speakers to join me, and I'm going to hand it over to Peter to start. For our speakers, just you're welcome to introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself before you present. And then I'll be coming back around at the end of Sylvia's presentation to see what questions we have from the audience. And so if you're an attendee and you have questions, you can use the Q&A box. You can also email Robin Troutman at rtroutman@naacdd.org, and we'll collect your questions that way as well. All right, take it away, Peter.
Awesome. Thank you, Lillian. And my name again is Peter Steffen. I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights DC. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a white masculine presenting person with brown hair and brown eyes in a blue and white grid checked dress shirt. And Disability Rights DC, or DRDC, is the federally designated protection and advocacy program for the District of Columbia. DRDC advocates on behalf of district residents with disabilities, including individuals impacted by our criminal legal system, to ensure their full participation in all aspects of the electoral process, including registering to vote, accessing polling places, and casting ballots. And DRDC is a member of the Restore the Vote Coalition, which conducts outreach to incarcerated district residents and advocacy efforts to ensure everyone is able to exercise their right to vote behind bars. The coalition consists of the ACLU, the Sentencing Project, Campaign Legal Center, the League of Women Voters, and advocates with lived experience in carceral settings. In our work with the coalition in 2020, DRDC provided individualized outreach to all of our current and former clients who have disabilities in the Department of Corrections and Bureau of Prison facilities. We also worked with BOP to distribute information on registering to vote and balloting by mail to all district residents in their facilities nationwide. In 2022, we worked with the coalition to create a unified guide for voter registration and successfully advocated with the Board of Elections to streamline the registration process for incarcerated residents. My presentation today is about breaking down barriers to voting for people with disabilities in jail and prison. So next slide, please. So disability injustice is represented disproportionately in every marginalized community and in systems including voting and the criminal legal system. Individuals who are incarcerated often do not have their voices heard, and having the right to vote is important to them. It also helps them connect to the community many will return to. And so to illustrate the importance of what I'm talking about here, I wanted to highlight a quote from an incarcerated DC resident that was in a recent NPR article on why voting is important to him. The first time Vance Conti ever voted in his life, he did it from the confines of a federal prison in Central Florida. And quote, "I came to prison when I was a juvenile, so it gave me a sense of responsibility, not just for myself, but as a community," he says during a phone call from FCI Hazleton in West Virginia. "My vote could possibly help others and deter others from following my track and make the world possibly a better place." The illustration here is of a mailed ballot going to a ballot box. Next slide, please. In 2020, the district passed the Restore the Vote Amendment Act, which restored the right to vote to district residents with felony convictions while incarcerated. Therefore, by way of background, you can vote in DC now if you're a US citizen, you're at least 18 years old, or you can pre-register at 16 or 17 years old, and you lived in DC for 30 days before an election or more, or before, prior to your incarceration. And you do not plan to vote in another state, and you have not been found legally incompetent to vote by a court. The photo here is from the Sentencing Project of a man standing in a prison unit with his arms behind his back, wearing a Can Vote t-shirt. Other men incarcerated are standing in the background in their green and white striped prison uniforms. Next slide, please. For context on this discussion, nearly 4 in 10 state prisoners and nearly 3 in 10 federal prisoners have a disability. More than half of state prisoners and federal prisoners aged 55 to 64 report having a disability, and 7 in 10 federal and state prisoners aged 65 or older reported having a disability. This data is from a 2016 study from the DOJ Bureau of Labor or Justice Statistics, excuse me. And the photo is an elderly prisoner in a wheelchair looking out the window. Next slide, please. To break that down a little more, about 12% of prisoners are blind or have significant visual disabilities. 10% of prisoners are deaf or hard of hearing. 12% have mobility disabilities. 23% report a cognitive disability. 25% of state prisoners and 14% of federal prisoners said they have ever attended special education classes. And estimates of mental illness for prisoners varies widely, from 20 to 25% with a serious mental illness, up to 73% for a female and 55% of male prisoners with at least, quote, one mental health problem, unquote. Next slide, please. Just to frame this, presentation a little more, DC has no state or local prison. Because of an act called the Revitalization Act of '97, anyone who's convicted of felonies in DC are transferred to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and approximately 2,200 DC residents are incarcerated in federal prisons across the country. Incarceration in the federal system compounds the inaccessibility of voting for people with disabilities in these facilities. Some barriers to voting are in DC's control, but most require the cooperation of the federal government to overcome. DC has 2 jail facilities within the DOC, the Central Treatment Facility and Central Detention Facility, or DC Jail. As of March of this year, about 1,300 individuals are in these in the DC jail facilities. Like I mentioned, in 2020, the Restore the Vote Amendment Act made changes to expand voter registration and voting in the jail, in the Department of Corrections facilities, and in the BOP, because it added the Department of Corrections as an automatic voter registration agency, and it charged the board to make sure everyone received a voter registration form. In the 2020 general election, 333 district residents in the DC jail and the CTF voted. As I mentioned, as a result of our advocacy in this last June primary this year, the DC jail and the CTF both had in-person polling places during early voting. And the photo here is of the DC jail. Next slide, please. This illustration is the voter information infographic that DOJ presents to the public. It's linked on its website, and BOP claims it posts this in every facility. I just wanted to point out that even with the caveats about, it says, look to the resources for your state, they go on to say you must register to vote before you can request an absentee ballot. And this is just an example of one of the, obstacles here, because that's not really right for district residents. The Board of Elections wants them to do both at the same time. And in practice, ballots are not always treated as legal mail. Next slide, please. Individuals who are incarcerated are required to fill out this paper form to register to vote. It's not accessible for people with print-related disabilities. Normally, absentee ballot voters must include with this form a document that shows their name, the proof of their name and address. And this can be any number of documents. It doesn't have to be a photo ID. But for many incarcerated voters, another barrier is they no longer have that documentation. It's outdated, or they never had it to begin with. The Board of Elections in DC is trying to address this barrier by using the individual's jail or prison ID number and the last 4 digits of their social security number as reported on this form to try to verify them without the need for, identifying documentation. Another barrier for incarcerated voters especially in BOP facilities, is that without their BOP ID number, the mail is just not delivered to them. And so in 2022, we worked, along with the Restore the Vote Coalition to update, to get the board to update their registration form to capture this ID information to help ensure that ballots got delivered to people in these facilities. There are still some barriers on this form because district residents in jail or prison get confused. On the form, it says they have to swear under penalty of law that they live in DC, even if they're incarcerated outside of DC. Some people don't know what to put for their residential address because they don't remember or they didn't have one, if they were homeless until they were incarcerated. Next slide, please. There are additional barriers to voting that people with disabilities face in jail and prison, including just a lack of policies and procedures to identify people with disabilities who need accommodations to vote and, for registration. When election officials don't know who needs accommodations, then the burden is on the incarcerated person to request that. And corrections officials either do not systemically track disability of people in their custody, and even when they do, they often undercount them. Another barrier is lack of outreach and education just about the right to vote in these facilities and the right to accommodations. Paper registration forms, like I mentioned, are inaccessible for people with print-related disabilities. paper absentee ballots are inaccessible for the same reasons. And, although voters with a disability have the right to assistance if they want it, reliance often falls on prison buddies, someone else, a fellow incarcerated person, to help the person with a disability to complete their ballot. And that denies that person with a disability their right to private and independent vote. When people who are in the BOP facility systems, are transferred to a different prison, they often don't receive their ballot because they have to manually update their mailing address every time. And, people can be transferred many times. Even when they have the address updated, sometimes the mail is sent to the wrong facility or even to their home address. And so, the prison mail and postage system erects barriers. And, just because of the time it takes to return the ballot by the deadline. As a result, DC Board of Elections reported that only about half of the registered voters, 264 out of 562 in BOP facilities, successfully returned a ballot during the 2020 general election. A couple other issues I just wanted to mention: prison staff sometimes opening voter mail, which is supposed to be treated as legal mail and not opened. Ensuring that people in solitary confinement or segregation have access to voting. Next slide, please. So, as I've illustrated or outlined at least some examples, voting while incarcerated is very challenging, particularly if you have a disability. We're pushing for the Board of Elections here to work more with, the DC Department of Corrections and the Bureau of Prisons to do outreach and provide accommodations. We've had more success locally because the federal system just is not willing to work with our local board. But these efforts that we're pushing include, extending the registration and ballot deadlines for incarcerated voters because of those mail delays I mentioned, implementing written policies to identify voters with disabilities and to help, with them with registration and voting if they want it. Allowing voters with disabilities to affirm that they need an accessible ballot or other accommodations, providing those forms in multiple formats and for access, right? Language, access, large print, accessible electronic formats, voting in person when possible with accessible voting machines, and pushing for those to be mailed available, at all facilities. And if in-person voting is not available, providing accessible remote ballots with an option for electronic ballot return. Ensuring systems are in place for registering people in solitary confinement and allowing them to vote and return their ballot. Implementing voter education. That's come up a lot recently with where individuals wanted candidate information and ensuring that's available in multiple accessible formats well in advance of Election Day. One example is the League of Women's Voters Guide. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, that was the slide that I was just talking about. But yes, these are continued breaking down barriers. So next slide, please. And that's it for me. I know we'll reserve questions for the end. So thank you.
This is Lillian. Fred, you can go ahead. We'll get you spotlighted and then you can start.
My name is Fred. I'm with Disabilities. The management will be very much by
Hi there. This is Elisa Hopper. I will also be joining Fred Neeson just to do some of the speech back to the group. So what Fred was just saying as an introduction for himself, he said, Hi, my name is Fred Neeson. I am with Disability Rights California, or also known as DRC. DRC is California's protection and advocacy system for people with disabilities.
I'm the manager for by the group with a small date is
Fred is the managing attorney of DRC's Voting Right Practice Group, and he oversees a dedicated team of 2 attorneys and 1 senior advocate.
And I'm a white male, but white and the mother with the DLC logo in the background.
Just giving a general description of this first slide, which states his name, his title. The name of the presentation is Voting in Congregate Care Facilities, and the DRC logo is up at the top.
And next slide. Vote in California, essentially everybody over 18 and California resident. The person eligible about employment because of a felony or fines, but they lack the capacity to vote, which is limited circumstances.
This first slide is titled Voter Eligibility. In California, essentially every citizen over the age of 18 years old is eligible to vote unless they are in prison, incarcerated for a felony, or unless a court finds that they lack the capacity in limited circumstances.
And the land has been very hard to meet, and it's been easier to be eligible if you are in the which in other states for guardianship.
Can you repeat that first part, Fred? I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
The standard has been made difficult to meet for judge to revoke somebody's right to vote if they are under disability.
So in recent years, the standards that must be met for a judge to take away somebody's voting right when they're under a conservatorship has gotten higher. There's a higher standard.
What the judge that means very rare. But the voter eligibility is different in each state. I will not go into more detail.
So voting eligibility is a complex subject and varies state to state. So we will not be going further into that now.
It's like, I yes, or I will and then I move before mental illness or developmental disability.
This slide is titled Examples of Congregate Care Facilities. The list of these facilities include nursing facilities, intermediate care facilities, hospitals, rehabilitation hospitals, and state hospitals, including for people with mental health and developmental disabilities.
One big barrier is doing outreach and facilities because administrators are reluctant to have advocates, especially agencies to come to facility to do public outreach.
This slide is titled Outreach to Congregate Care Facilities. The subject will be barriers to voting outreach to congregate care facility residents. Fred was saying that a main barrier to this type of outreach is that administrators of facilities are reluctant to allow advocates, especially from protection and advocacy agencies, to come to the facilities to do these voter outreaches.
A few years ago, we I a material about disability and about what we do and requested that we be allowed to meet with the residents about voting in the next election. And responded. And one of them were only staff.
A few years ago, DRC sent a packet of information about what DRC, the service that DRC provides, and information about voting in the upcoming election, and offered to do presentations. Of those attempts, only 2 out of maybe 100 facilities responded to our offer. One of those facilities only allowed us to talk to their staff and did not allow us access to the residents.
Next slide. But all we did the outreach meeting with our elected officials and the other but hospital but under facilities and I believe very flexible to them. I've been beneficial in our business, and we work collaboratively with them. The initial official jail.
And aside from outreach at facilities, we've also been, sorry, I got a little distracted by the sounds. We've been meeting with election officials to discuss some of the difficulties voters in congregate care facilities face and ways to make that voting more accessible. We also work collaboratively with these election officials to come up with plans to enable election officials to work more close, work collaboratively with us.
That is to help someone they be able to at least or the side about how we enable the residents to vote.
I'm sorry, Fred, can you repeat that?
They've been willing to work with the facilities to enable voting.
We've been wanting to work with.
They have been able to work with the facilities.
They have been able to work with the facilities.
To at least explain how to enable the residents to vote.
To explain how to enable the residents to vote.
We've also met with ombudsman successful.
We've been less successful meeting with
Ombudsman,
ombudsman.
but some of them have been really good for the facilities.
But some of them have been very helpful at facilities.
And a lot of them are a little more welcome.
And county election officials are a little more welcome.
Than we were.
Than you were.
Most live. One way it happened is for ballot delivery. We get a lot of from voters in the facility or not able to leave their home, but not have a ballot.
This next slide is titled Ballot Delivery. We get a lot of phone calls from residents at facilities who are not able to leave their home, but also don't have a ballot.
One the main option, the only option is a paper ballot. And in California, we have a medical emergency ballot where each resident or somebody at home can authorize somebody to pick up the ballot and bring to them after they fill out a signed envelope to bring it back to a voting location.
For the paper ballot, there is a requirement, or it is possible in the case of a medical emergency for a person to authorize a friend or relative to go pick up their ballot, bring it to them so they can complete it. And once the envelope is signed, the person that picked it up can return it to a voting location.
Okay, let me skip over and talk about sometimes will handle about it and pick it up. A bomb.
So also, some counties will also deliver a ballot upon request.
can you read the one line? Can we get down to electronic ballot delivery? And we have a system with both disabilities and using computers among the ballot with their own system device. And then print it out and mail it in. Fine today.
I do believe that we have lost Alyssa.
Hi, it looks like we lost Elisa. I'm the next presenter, so I can read Fred's slides as well. Fred, I can go over this slide for you. It is titled Ballot Delivery, and it says electronic ballot delivery. At least 30 states offer electronic ballot delivery for voters with disabilities. Voters with disabilities can use their computer or other device with their own assistive device or software to read and mark the ballot. In some states, including California, this is called Remote Accessible Vote by Mail, or RAVBM.
But I just
And I think that we do have Alyssa back.
Hi there. Yes, technical difficulties. I got booted, but I'm back now.
Thank you.
let me just say one more thing that I'm out of time. We've been trying to get electronic return, but we've been unsuccessful. If anybody wants more information, you can contact me. You can have my email.
So one just quick note, since we're running close to time, DRC has been working on getting attempting to get electronic ballots made available, but have been unsuccessful. If anybody would like to get more information on that, please feel free to contact Fred via email. His email was on the first slide. It's fred.nason@disabilityrightsca.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. And we'll, just a reminder for everyone, we just put, let me spotlight myself. I just put a reminder in the chat that we will be sharing all the slides again afterwards with y'all by email so that you can get Fred's email. All right, okay. So I'm gonna pass it to you, Sylvia.
Hello all, you heard my voice a few minutes ago. My name is Sylvia Albert and I'm the Director of Voting and Elections at Common Cause. I am a female presenting brown woman with curly dark brown hair. I'm wearing a gray and pink floral shirt and I am in my office. So behind me, you see a few voting rights posters that say "My vote, my voice," "Black voters matter," etc. So I just wanted to highlight that outside of the specific systems involved that Peter and Fred spoke about, there is actually a huge community of voting rights advocates that is constantly fighting for access to the ballot for all voters, including persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. And we call that the network election protection. And the slide reads, what is election protection? Next slide. The Election Protection Coalition is made up of more than 300 national, state, and local partners. It works year-round to ensure all voters have an equal opportunity to vote. And members include disability advocates who bring their expertise in developing solutions to provide access to the ballot. Fred and his team at DRC in California are an important partner in this work, as are different disability advocacy groups around the country. And I think sometimes there is a thought that we are separate, that there are voting rights groups and that there are disability groups, and and that maybe the voting rights groups aren't as engaged. And I just want to make sure people know that we are definitely working very hard to make sure that accessibility for all voters, regardless of their needs, is built into every single part of the election protection work. And so election protection, when we use that term, when I use the term election protection, I really mean the work that these partners are doing year round. So that includes when they are advocating for good policies to make sure that persons with disabilities can access the ballot, whether that's curbside voting or vote by mail, of course, which was so important in 2020, or fighting against unreasonable signature match and things like that. So all year round, we are absolutely working to provide access and to ensure that election officials know what to do to provide that access. And I know you'll hear later from Michelle Bishop at NDRN, but Michelle Bishop has she's a great advocate and points out often that all you need to provide access is sometimes just a wooden board and a yellow cone. And so we try to make sure that everybody in the coalition and election officials know what can be done to provide access. Next slide. So our goals for election protection is on election day and in the direct times directly around it, provide trusted nonpartisan information, help voters have their ballots counted, and report and resolve problems. So this is what I would term the second part of election protection. The first part is we advocate year round, we do what we can to get good policies. The second part is you as an individual are trying to vote and you're encountering a problem. We want to do what we can to help. Next slide. And next slide. So this is a slide that has, this slide has a photo on it of a number of people in a conference room on the phone with computers in front of them. So a big part of election protection is a hotline. In 2020, we had almost 250,000 phone calls, so 246,000. These calls, the top 3 categories we heard from people on these calls was polling place access, voter intimidation, and photo ID or registration issues. So next slide. These hotlines are offered in English, Spanish, Arabic, and a number of API languages. This slide shows the phone numbers, the different phone numbers. There has been in the past an ASL number, and we are hopeful that we can get that back up and running. Next slide. Next slide. And the second part of our, another large part of our program is our field volunteers. So those are election volunteers, any volunteers who are around the country, outside polling places, there to help voters, answer questions, call the lawyers on the who are standing by on the hotline to get any legal help that's needed to ensure that voters have access. So this this slide shows 3 photos of different volunteers around the country. The first photo to the left is a white presenting blonde woman standing next to a sign that says election protection. The photo in the middle is a white presenting brown haired woman standing with a blow up doll of a dinosaur and boxes of voter registrations forms, which this volunteer had put on her front yard to entice people to stop. The T-Rex was to entice people to stop. And the third photo is a Black presenting woman outside of a polling location, wearing an election protection t-shirt and standing next to a sign that says election protection. Next slide. And I just want to point out that when I say that we have people around the country helping, that is in various ways. So we have poll monitors, those are the people outside the polling locations, but we also have social media monitors. We have volunteers that stand in one place, or stay in one place, I should say, and volunteers that move around to different places or go to Board of Elections meetings. So there's lots of ways to volunteer if you would like to. And you can do that by going to www.protectthevote.net. But also just want you to know that if you're unable to volunteer but actually need the assistance, there are thousands and thousands of people around the country who are working with advocates and are there on election day to assist and help ensure that you have access to the ballot and can vote a ballot that will count. So that's it for me.
Hey, this is Lillian, just making sure I'm spotlighted. Okay, great. All right, thank you so much, Sylvia, Fred, and Peter. So we are about to take our second and last break. We've just had so much good content to cover. And so we're actually just gonna cut this short we're gonna cut this break a little bit short. And so we will just take 5 minutes. We'll come back at 3:10 Eastern. And then we will join back at 3:10 Eastern for our third session. And again, we've had, a lot of great content. All of the slides have been shared in an email you should have received just before today's summit, and we'll make sure that that information is shared with you afterwards as well. All right, thank you all. See you at 3:10 Eastern.
Hi, it's Andrew Polrang again. Welcome back. And I hope everyone is doing well and finding these discussions useful. I certainly am. It's been great so far. So our next session will be another panel titled Partnering for Success. And we're lucky to have as our moderator, Rebecca Coakley, Program Officer in the President's Office of the Ford Foundation. And the other panelists are Olivia Babbis, Senior Public Policy Analyst at Disability Rights Florida, Rosemary Avila of All Voting is Local in Arizona, and Priestley Johnston, Director of Strategic Community Partnerships at When We All Vote. And this panel is set to end at about 3:53, thereabouts, give or take, I'm sure. And after that, we'll have a wrap up of today's sessions. So Rebecca, take it from here.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Coakley. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. We're going to start our panel with introductions. We're going to ask our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves and their experience in disability and voting rights work. To start, I'm Rebecca Coakley. My pronouns are she, hers. I come to you from unceded Lenape territory in the amazing Garden State of New Jersey. I am wearing a red blazer and a black ACLU Dissent is Patriotic t-shirt. And I am going to pass it to Olivia. Olivia, can you go next, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Babbis. I'm the Senior Public Policy Analyst at Disability Rights Florida, a position I've held for about 3.5 years now. I do a lot of our lobbying and legislative work, but I also handle a lot of our voting rights work as well. I work with our Rev Up chapter and help facilitate the meetings and activities for Access the Vote Florida. And prior to that, I worked at a Center for Independent Living as a peer mentor, helping other people with disabilities meet their long-term, short-term goals. And I was previously a candidate for the Florida State Senate in 2018.
Thank you so much. Priestley, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello. Thank you all for having me. My name is Priestley Johnson. I'm the Director of Strategic Community Partnerships here at When We All Vote. When We All Vote was started in 2016 by Mrs. O, started off of the basis of the 2016 election. It was founded in 2018 by Mrs. Obama to help increase voter participation in each and every election. I am a young Black woman that is wearing an orange shirt and a head tie and some awesome gold earrings.
Love the earrings, Priestley. Rosemary, can you introduce yourself next?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosemary Avila. I have she, her pronouns. I am a mixed raced person who has curly, wavy black hair, and I'm wearing a black and white striped shirt. I am the Arizona campaign manager for All Voting is Local. We started off in 2018 as a project of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and have recently spun off into our own organization. And I've been with the All Voting is Local team since 2019. Thank you for having me.
Rebecca, I'm sorry, I completely flaked on my physical description and I meant to include that. I am a white woman in her 40s, wearing glasses with a clear and black frame. I have long, kind of wavy, dirty blonde hair. I'm wearing a red, white, and blue striped shirt. And I have the Disability Rights Florida background behind me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olivia. So let's jump right in. And Olivia, I'm going to pose this first question to you. As we know, society assumes so much about disabled people. They assume we all get paid to stay at home. They assume that anyone who is in our company in public is our carer or care provider, as opposed to a friend, a date, or a spouse. What is a common misconception about the disability vote?
There are a lot. I do self-identify as a person with a disability. I am a part-time power chair user and I was actually born without arms. So I use my feet to do everything. I think there's that perception of people with disabilities as perpetual children. We're often infantilized. People talk to us like we are, 10 years old for all eternity. And so I think there's a question of capacity, that just all people with disabilities are incapacitated and don't have the ability to make their own decisions. And that includes with voting. As you mentioned, a lot of people think that the people that are with us, whether they're our partners or our family members or friends, are automatically our caregivers, and that's not true. I've run into situations, particularly when I was running for office, for campaign events, where disabled parking spaces would be blocked off, and law enforcement was blocking them off and reserving them for media so they could park their media vans close to the building. And they just did an ADA drop-off section as if all of us have transportation provided for us and none of us actually drive. I guess they thought my car would go park itself after I got out of it. I don't know. But those are a lot of the things that I run into, that we can't function independently in our lives, and that we don't have the ability to make our own decisions. And I think those are kind of the two root problems that we have in regards to people voting and just making our own decisions in general.
Thank you so much. I definitely think in the year of Free Britney, if we're going to make a reference to Free Britney, we might as well throw it in right now. One of the things that was so interesting to me to learn about the fight to remove guardianship is that one of the largest reasons that disabled people want to be emancipated from a guardianship ruling is to be able to vote. It's not to be able to, go to the clubs with their friends. It's not to be able to go to college or live their life. Voting, that is how important our democracy is to voters with disabilities, that we actually tangibly have to go to court to remove unfair guardianship policies to be able to access a fundamental cornerstone of our democracy.
And we're held to a standard.
Exactly.
We're held to a higher standard. And, oftentimes when people are challenging a guardianship or looking to have their voting rights restored, and that's, the only issue where they're looking for rights restoration, they have to prove why they want to vote and how they go about the process that they use in deciding how to vote on issues or what candidates to vote on. And we don't hold other communities to that standard. When you go to register to vote, you don't have to provide justification as to why you want to vote and explain the process that you're going to use when deciding who to vote. And that's, like I said, a higher standard that people with disabilities are often held to.
Definitely. I think one of the challenges for a long time has been this focus on independence versus interdependence. When Ed Roberts founded the independent living movement in the Bay Area, one of the things that he talked about frequently was the need to focus more on interdependence versus independence. And I think somebody must have made a typo somewhere along the way and saw that word potentially shortened. But we know that interdependence is a principle of the disability rights movement and specifically the disability justice movement. And it's also true for movements and activists. None of us can do this work on our own. Across my panelists, what are the goals that your work has had and what partnerships have you all developed to help achieve them? And I think even more so, and this was something that Priestley brought up in our prep session, how do you make partnerships more than just transactional? And Priestley or Rosemary, if either of you want to start, go ahead and jump in.
Well, I can jump in and my daily activity every day is to talk to partners and ask them, what can we do to bring value to the work that you're doing? I work in voter registrations. Voter registrations are our bread and butter. And we ask our organizations to adopt our voter registration portal and to take action in their capacity, in their best capacity. But for me, it's really important because it's a tall ask to ask an organization to adopt an entire measure and to get their people to get buy-in and then ask their people to take action. Like it's a tall ask for to take action. I mean, you have to be dedicated to the preservation of our democracy to be able to do this, right? And it's not, a lot of the times it's not their daily activity. They're over there saving the world in their own capacity, and they have their own initiatives and missions and things like that. that. So it's really important for me to have most conversations centered around, what is your organization focused on? What do you have coming up? Do you have an incredible event coming up? Do you need our help pushing it out, promoting it on social? The work that you're doing with us, does it will it benefit you all to be highlighted with When We All Vote? Will it what are the things that you're looking for out of this partnership, and centering the partnership around that, not only numbers and impact, but saying, what are the great things that you can get out of working with us that doesn't make this feel like it's transactional. I work with a lot of organizations, and I can say they want to be some organizations, they want to be our number one partner, and being able to tell the world that they are our number one partner means something to them, and it allows them to can even go to their funders and say, what are the work we're doing? The numbers matter, and I think making sure that this is not just a transactional relationship. I'm able to talk to them and say, we can just do something for you all just because. If this is important to you, great. And then also on our end, saying on the other end, hey, I need some help. Being very honest with them, saying, hey, these are our metrics. This is what we're trying to hit. And that transparency allows for the partner relationship to be better. So they can say transparently, hey, we need help with this. And we can tell them, hey, we need help with that. So it doesn't feel like we are just saying, hey, you need to do this for us. It feels like it's not transactional. It's really a relationship that we're building to meet a common goal. And those common goals have to be shared up front, and they have to be transparent, and it has to feel like a great time working with each other. So I love actually getting to know people and having a relationship. It makes things a lot easier.
Rosemary, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is Rosemary, and I will start by saying that the goal and the guiding principle that all Voting is Local operates on is eliminating unnecessary and discriminatory barriers to the ballot before it happens. But what does that actually mean? I think essentially, to oversimplify the work that we do, it focuses on accessibility, which I know is a very loaded term that means different things for different people. So in line with the work that we do at All Voting is Local, that means that we are ensuring that all aspects of the voting process, from registration to election day to early voting to after the election to signature curing, all aspects are everybody who is an eligible voter has equal opportunity to access that process. And we meet voters where they are with us. And we particularly focus on historically disenfranchised voters. I like to say historically intentionally overlooked and underserved communities. What that means here in Arizona are Indigenous communities, folks with disabilities, elderly voters, voters of color, Black voters, student voters. And so we lean very heavily into a coalition structure of work here. We don't have a membership base, but we lean heavily on our partners and work in collaborative spaces where we are asking organizations that we work with to activate their members, to assist us to be able to assist all voters with the election administrative aspect of the voting process, which means accessibility for voters. And some of the partnerships that we have developed don't just work with organizations or people who are on the ground, but directly with election officials, because I think some of the misconception going into what was talked about, the previous question about, the disabled vote is that because polling locations, for example, are ADA compliant, that in and of itself is sufficient to meet the disabled community where they're at. And as Olivia pointed out, that is not enough, because sometimes there are barriers that are erected on election day where the ADA compliance is kind of out of the window. And so what we have done in the off cycle years, and Rebecca, I think we had a little discussion about this preliminarily about the work that's done to ensure access to voting happens, most of it when there aren't election years. And so what we have done is we've partnered with organizations that work on the ground, amplifying the concerns that they have for the communities that they serve, and bringing those priority issues to the election officials in all 15 counties here in Arizona, and saying, ensuring, yes, we want to make sure that you're complying with your statutory obligations. So complying with federal, state law, and the regulatory body, which is our election procedures manual, but also, are there opportunities for you to go above and beyond what is asked for you by law? Can you adopt these best practices? These are the things that we're seeing in the community that matter to folks, and we need you to take a proactive approach to trying to ensure that these barriers are eliminated. And yes, it's asking you to go above and beyond and adopt these best practices that aren't required of you, but can you be a good partner as an election official and adopt these so that we can ensure that voters in your county are able to access the equal opportunity that they deserve to have for the voting process. And so that is one of the partnerships that I think is very valuable, where we act as kind of a mediator between folks and organizations on the ground to amplify the needs that they are seeing to the election officials who have the power to conduct the way that elections are run in their counties.
Thank you so much. So we heard a lot about the different types of partnerships, and I'm wondering, across the three of you, are there any organizations that you've already been working with in coalition on the ground that you're like, this is really cool? What would it mean to be able to scale this up nationally? I often think about what we saw in the state of Georgia in advance of the gubernatorial election last go round, where we saw the Georgia Voters Project work very closely with disability organizations when there were attempts to specifically close polling places in low income and in the African American community as a result of non-compliance with the ADA. They didn't care that these sites were not accessible the previous 30 years, but all of a sudden, in that particular election, we saw an attempt to use a civil right to oppress and suppress the vote of another community. And I found myself thinking, what would it look like to scale that sort of partnership up nationally? Are there partnerships that you all engage with that you're like, what would it look like to grow this beyond this particular space?
I can jump in. A great example. Well, one thing that at When We All Vote and in my job I do is that I work with national organizations first. I usually do a top-down method, just to make sure that not only are we thinking strategically about the entire landscape of America, but making sure you have leadership buy-in is very important. It's really important. However, the people on the ground are even more important because they are the ones that are doing the work. So I would say the one partnership that jumps out to me is I had an organization called 1,000 Women Strong. And when we were doing that concerted effort in Georgia ahead for the runoff, they were doing some great work on the ground. And they were like, they were doing some great work on the ground. We highlighted some of the work on our during one of our rallies, and it was really great. We ended that, the Georgia runoff went well, and we kind of stopped communication. They reached out to us and they said, hey, don't you want to work with us on a larger scale? Which is, on our end, we should always be thinking of that. We should always say, oh, you guys are this, if this is a tiny touch of what you guys are doing, how can, if this is a tiny drop of what you guys are doing on this local end, I imagine your local chapters are all doing great work. So, we are now joined into a partnership that is larger, and we can have even more impact. And one thing I love to do when I talk to local chapters is I say, hey, how has the messaging been trickling down to you? How does it look to you? Is it actually, is the emails, is it going tone deaf? Are we talking about the right issues that are meaningful on the ground to your local level? Is there things that are going on and happening on the ground we should be aware of and that we should be thinking about? So I do see there to be an awesome connection between making sure you have number one on the top, having the leadership buy-in, but on the local level, having the connection with the local branches, members, chapters, whatever that looks like, depending on the organization that you're working with and whatever structure they have, is to make sure that you're not being tone deaf, that you keep an open door and you are talking to them, because though they know first, when they feel like they can talk to you, they're more candid with you, and we can do better work and have a higher chance at impact together. So that's what I'm thinking.
Did anyone else want to jump in on that question?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
We work in coalition with State Voices, League of Women Voters. We worked closely in coalition with for a while now. In Florida, we've all kind of existed in our own ivory towers a little bit. And so we'll come out and hold hands for a few minutes for an event, and then everybody kind of goes back to their space. And so we're really trying to break down those barriers for the sake of efficiency, if anything. A lot of organizations have very small budgets. We are in coalition with some, regional organizations throughout the state. So we don't want to be reinventing the wheel 50 times. Like, I love that when people reach out for feedback on their voter guides, for example, to make sure that they're accessible. But then why do we need 50 voter guides for the state? Like, why aren't we all, pulling our resources together to do a more comprehensive, inclusive voter guide that is accessible for people? So I think we're kind of figuring out still that dynamic of where to plug in every organization's expertise. Obviously, ours is in accessibility. We will help you make sure that event is accessible. We will help you with ASL interpreters, making sure spaces are accessible, helping you locate spaces that are accessible. But we don't want to hold, 5 different candidate forums, one focusing on disability, one focusing on this issue over here. Of course, our issues aren't identical, but they do run parallel to each other, and there is some overlap. So I think finding where that intersection is and making sure that we're focusing on that, so we can coordinate larger events together that are more inclusive versus having, this disability candidate forum over here, and then Black Lives Matter over here, and then, criminal justice reform over here, kind of pulling all those things together, talking about where they overlap. You're going to get more participation that way anyway. I can tell you as a candidate, when you get 15 invitations to town halls, you can't be in 3 places at one time. So kind of pulling those resources together, it makes things easier for those that we're working with and doing outreach to, but also provides the opportunity to plug in our expertise in various areas. We actually used our AAPD grant in 2020 to coordinate efforts with other organizations that regularly did phone banking, which is something we don't do, to reach out to people in facilities when supervised facility voting was suspended in Florida, to make sure those individuals were getting to vote. So coordinating those kind of efforts with going, okay, you do phone banking, we don't do that, but here's the script that we need you to operate from. We can throw some grant money your way to help with that. And so we've built some really good relationships, kind of taking that kind of approach.
This is Rosemary, and I can quickly also jump in here. And there are 2 of our partners that come to mind when you ask this question, Rebecca. And the first is the Arizona Center for Disability Law, who is a part of many of the coalitions that we are plugged into. And we have been working on developing more collaborative partnerships with. They are a good resource for us. In full transparency, All Voting is Local is continuing to actively work on ensuring that the work that we do, the events that we hold, the materials that we distribute are accessible to folks. And so I think it's a great learning opportunity for us to be aligned with organizations like ACDL, Arizona Center for Disability Law, because they are, plugged in. And like Olivia said, they are doing a lot of work that we are not experts and do not claim to be experts in, that we are still actively working on, trying to learn about. So being aligned with organizations and doing collaborative partnerships with them is something that we greatly value. And lastly, we work in partnership with a Native Vote Coalition out here in Arizona. Our tribal communities and Native voters are a core and essential part of the work that we do here in Arizona. So the Indian Legal Clinic at Arizona State University is where I actually that was actually the catalyst for me coming into this voting rights space when I was a student years ago there. They have an election protection, a Native Vote election protection project that houses a Native Vote hotline that is specifically stood up to assist and troubleshoot some of the unique barriers that Native voters face in Arizona, because unfortunately, the right to vote for Native voters was within the past couple of decades, and they still continue to disproportionately experience barriers in accessing the voting process. So those are two of our partners that I wanted to lift up and just shout out that they are doing some incredible work here on the ground in Arizona. And we are very fortunate to be working in collaborative partnerships and relationships and in coalition with both of them.
Those are all just awesome organizations. And I think it's really powerful to hear you all talk about the quality of these relationships. And, I think as a funder, I will give the funders a little bit of crap for a moment and say, as a funder, I think so often we stay focused on the metrics and stay focused on quantity. How many events did you do? How many people turned out, et cetera, versus really spending some time thinking deeply about what is the quality of the work that's being done. So how do we balance that conversation? I heard a lot of you talk, and I think one of the things that was really cool, Olivia, that you pointed out was the importance of finding ways to collaborate on events and things like that, pulling together a disability event with a BLM event and, meeting people where they are. So how in the democracy space do we balance the quality of partnerships versus the quantity? And also, I'm going to ask a tricky question, because I don't think this is something we often like to talk about. This is also where the learning happens. What can we really learn from the partnerships that didn't work out?
I want to start with the partnerships that don't work out, because I think this is a really great point, and I love talking about this, because when you learn the things that don't work, better where your magic sauce is. And I think there is strength there. And so I would say an example of where partnership didn't work out, and this is really interesting, is with AAPD. AAPD has when we all vote in AAPD, we had a national partnership, and we wanted you all to use our voter registration portal, and it was great, and we did some great impact in 2020. But when we looked at 2022, we know that sometimes you are the best messengers. You know your community better than us. It doesn't make sense for us to be duplicating each other's work. We're trying to do the same thing. It's better for us to collaborate on another thing. Not saying that we shouldn't be working together, that we shouldn't be standing side to side on issues, but that means that in this specific area, you all are the best people to reach the people that we all want to reach. And so sometimes it's getting out of the way. It's saying, hey, you've got it. You're doing great work. How can we support you? Versus saying, hey, can we get in there too? Let's do it as well. I think there's a lot of value in saying, let me get out of the way. And I think there is beauty in that, and saying, you guys, you have the data points, you have the messaging, you have the community already built. And that's just one tiny example, but I know on other layers that there is so much we can do. And at the end of the day, when we think about the collaboration of advocacy efforts we did when it came to the Freedom to Vote Act, that would help the disability community gain access to the ballot, we stood side and side in solidarity together, and we said, this is a bill that we both care about. Same thing with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And of course, we wanted to go a little bit further, and we wanted to do more work, but we knew that was a starting place. And that's something that we all wanted to do together. So I think it's also knowing what the lay of the land is. And then your first question was about impact versus quality versus quantity. And I love talking about this because in 2020, we boasted we have 400 partners working with us, and that just means 400 people made contact with us, but that doesn't mean that 400 organizations are actually doing work. And when it comes to the work that needs to get done, sometimes it's easier to sit in an intimate group and say, hey guys, what can we do to make the biggest impact, versus to say, hey, let's come to a huge party where we can't even hear each other and, try to get a plan on the table and do things. And sometimes it's great to work in a coalition. So you have to know what those moments are and when it's great to work in these really big environments, because the big environments have the biggest noise. And sometimes we just need to make some noise, and that's just what it is. And we all need to get the voice, sound the alarm. But then sometimes when we're just trying to, hey, map out what needs to go on, what's our plan, what's our strategy, how can we do this effectively, get into the weeds and really do impactful work, sometimes it's better to sit at a smaller table and say, hey, you guys were dedicated, you guys did awesome work with us, you wanted to do more work with us, let's see what that work looks like. And there's a lot of value to both ends, but it's up to us to really look and see what does that look like in a practical manner. And the biggest thing is impact. We can have a lot of people at the table, but we want to make sure that at the end of the day, what is the plan, what's the strategy, and how are we getting things done? And sometimes we need to cut some of the fat just so we can make sure we can hear and see everybody, and we can talk to people and actually have meaningful relationships. It's hard to get to know organizations. Each organization is like a child you have, right? You have each has their own personality, has their own path in life, has their own way that they want to approach things. And that's awesome. And there's beauty in that, and has a different community that they're reaching. There's beauty in each organization's unique take. And our job is to really see what that beauty is, to leverage that beauty and say, hey, how can we add to that? But when there's a lot of people at the table, it's harder to make the impact that you're looking for. When sometimes went in the funder lane, they're looking for the big numbers, like how many organizations did you work with in this way, how many did you do this way? But a lot of the times when you see the scale of the organization to the numbers that they're all doing incredible work. And it's really about prioritizing what is important to your organization. Do you want the numbers, or do you want the numbers of impact of like voter registrations or whatever your organization is looking for? Or do you want a lot of people at the table saying the same things at the same time? And sometimes you just have to prioritize what is important to your organization.
Definitely. I just want to say one thing, and then I'll totally pass it to you, Olivia. One of the things that my dear friend and colleague, Brittany Packnett Cunningham, always says is that budgets are moral documents. You spend your money on what you believe in. And I think this event is a great example of the disability community tangibly inviting non-disabled folks into our space, under our rules, into our culture. I don't often see that happen in real life. I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen democracy leaders outside of the disability community come to a disability rights event, engage, like sit down on the floor with a bunch of little people and have a conversation, or engage directly with our folks doing direct action. One of the things that I often think about in this way is how do we change that dynamic? And that to me is a real partnership thing. It's not just about getting together on an election year and having a big party, as you so rightly brought up, Priestley. It's about showing up during the off season. It's actually developing tangible relationship. Olivia, I know you have thoughts about this. I'm just going to turn it over to you, but I do think it's really important to think about when we're not in this virtual space, how do we continue to do this work, and how do we physically show up for each other when it is safe and possible for us to do so?
That's great. You read my mind, because I was kind of heading in that direction. So to kind of build off of something Priestley said and what you were just saying, one of the, I won't say bad coalition experiences we've had, but kind of a bump in the road that we hit was, we have this conversation in the disability community of, there is an issue with people trying to speak on behalf of people with disabilities who aren't members of the disability community. But I think, as we became more involved with our State Voices chapter and the coalition partners there, that people almost kind of went too far the other direction, where I was the voice of disability. And if I wasn't present, then nobody could talk about disability because it had to be a disabled person talking about disability. And just kind of, to Priestley's point about supporting each other. When we say we don't want people speaking on behalf of the disability community, that means inserting, your opinion of what you think people with disabilities need and want, and really following the lead of people with disabilities. But that doesn't mean that you can't be a messenger in the absence of a disabled person. So we had an instance in Florida recently where the subcommittee on elections actually had a hearing in Florida. We were not invited. No member of the disability community was invited. And even if invited, I wouldn't have been able to attend. I was already committed to another event. So when the people that were invited to the hearing provided testimony, they spoke to every marginalized community except for disability. So we were mentioned, in this laundry list of marginalized communities affected by the laws that were recently passed, but nothing specifically on how this impacted the disability community. So there was no voice there for us. So kind of in the follow-up meeting to that, when we became aware of that, welcome to Florida, Brian Russell said in the chat, yes. But when we became aware of that, we got on the State Voices and kind of had a come to Jesus moment of, I don't always have to be present for disability to be mentioned. We've talked about these issues regarding disability and the barriers that these new laws were creating for people with disabilities, that I've given you the messaging, and it's okay for you to promote that messaging and to send out that messaging and to make those statements, because it is coming from the disability community. So it doesn't mean that you can't speak to these issues at all. We just don't want you substituting your opinion or positions for our own. And so I think there was some confusion there. And when I kind of raised that issue of, I wasn't there, so nobody spoke about disability, everybody kind of had that, oh my God, aha moment. And so we ended up submitting written testimony, which then became a sign-on letter, because the other organizations within the coalition wanted the subcommittee members to know, hey, we noticed you did not invite the disability community to this. There was no presence. This is one of the most marginalized communities in the country, yet we didn't speak to the access barriers that were created by these policies for that community. So it kind of became a little bit of a turning point, I think, for our coalition. And so they're actually reaching out to us. We're getting ready to do a huge outreach to our supervisor of elections offices. We just did a website accessibility audit for all 67 counties. And our coalition partners want to be a part of that. But then they actually, without me prompting, turn around and looked at themselves and went, wait, we're going to approach these SOEs or the supervisor of elections about their inaccessible websites. Are our websites accessible? We don't want to be hypocritical in these meetings. So they actually reached out to us. So we're going to be doing a training on how to make your websites accessible on a budget. We know these things are expensive. How to make your social media toolkits accessible. So when you create them, I don't then have to go in and spend 2 hours writing alt text for all your graphics. Like, this is becoming habit. So there's been some key players. We've had people that have either disabilities themselves or relationships with people with disabilities that are kind of in the right roles to help support this and keep it moving. But I think that was really kind of the turning point for our coalition, where they had that aha moment of, oh my God, we can't throw this on Olivia all the time. I can't be in 5 places at once. And it's okay, for us to speak on behalf of the disability community or to present that messaging that's come from the disability community, even if we don't have someone there. And I think that was a really important realization for them.
Definitely. So we are at time, but I have like lightning round question. And so, let's get these answers out quick, and then we'll turn it obviously over back to the AAPD crew. Where do we go from here? Like, my question is really, at the end of the day, like, what happens to the impact when funding to do coalition work is done, or in those off years in between election cycles? And what should we be doing to sustain this work for the long term? And Rosemary, I'm going to let you go first, followed by Olivia, and then Priestley, and then we're out.
Yes, this is Rosemary, and I think we saw in 2020, the election cycle, there was COVID happened, and we were unprepared to run our elections the same way that we had normally run them. So we saw things like the Center for Tech and Civic Life. There were grants provided to election officials and jurisdictions to assist with some of, providing PPE, providing hazard pay for poll workers who might have been apprehensive, to work at the polls during this uncertain time. And unfortunately here in Arizona, that last legislative session, we had a law that bans any type of private funding, even though there was no evidence showing that, these private funds that were assisting and trying to assist with the voting process did anything wrong. And so I'm thinking of funding in that sense, of funding that helped our election administrators run elections in the best way possible when responding to a pandemic that's no longer available. And so moving forward, how do we go from here? I think is all voting is local. Here in Arizona, we lean heavily into the partnerships and the coalitions that we are part of. We work with them to work with our election officials to try to find creative solutions to work around this problem. We don't know what the answers exactly are right now, but really leaning heavily into our partners, the folks who are on the ground, who have insights into the communities that they work with, and just kind of using that as opportunities to figure out what are the best ways that we can assist so that we can work around, funding issues at the administrative level.
I'm sorry, Becky, can you repeat the question?
The question is, what do we do when the funding is gone, and how do we sustain partnership work for the long term?
I've worked at nonprofits with little budgets where you have this little $5,000, $10,000 grant that you are doing all of your civic engagement work with. I have the benefit now of being with Disability Rights Florida, the protection and advocacy organization. So we do have federal funding that we have every year. And so, we make sure that we let our partners know that we can provide technical assistance, that we know in your little $5,000 budget that you have to stretch for a month, that there isn't a whole lot in there to pay for an ASL interpreter or a live captioner. And we're willing to help out with those things and to make sure that people have the resources that they need to make those events more inclusive. So I think, helping to fill out the gaps where we have the resources to do so, where we receive regular annual funding. I know not every organization does that. So, we can help fill in gaps where they're lacking, particularly when it comes to expensive accessibility needs. And then, we turn to other organizations like what we did with phone banking, where we had a target population that we wanted to reach out to, but we didn't have the resources to do that. We had the funding, but we didn't have the infrastructure in place. So we were able to kind of grant some money to them in order to get that phone bank, which I know Jack's on the phone, so it was not PAVA funding that we were sub-granting. So just to make sure, we're in compliance with that. It was our AAPD funding that we used to kind of help fund that phone bank. So I think really kind of looking at each other again, what are our areas of expertise? Where do we have funding that we can kind of help support each other? And that can kind of, I think there's a lot of division, as you mentioned in one of the statements earlier, where we have, people kind of focusing on this issue or that issue. And if we have different viewpoints, it kind of divides these communities. And I think making sure that we don't feed into that attempt to divide, but that we're rather leading a unified front. I mean, we're all minority communities. That means that on our own, we are never going to be able to accomplish our goals because we are a minority. But if we're working together and we're working at the intersections of our communities, there's a lot more people power. And I think, like I said, filling in each other's gaps, knowing where those gaps are and kind of working together to kind of present that unified front instead of this divisive, pay attention to me, and going, no, we all have these same overlapping parallel issues that we're dealing with. How do we work together and coordinate? We can provide funding for this, you can provide phone banking and call banking for that, and just coordinating that way.
Great, and the last word goes to Priestley.
Wonderful. So I would say the best way that we can continue to make impact when the funding sometimes is not trickling in as fast as possible. I would say, number one, make a goal that is achievable with the capacity that you have, because sometimes we dream bigger than our hands and feet and abilities will allow us. Our biggest thing is to set realistic goals and operate in the best way that you can. And I will also say that partnership is most of the time free. Being able to have a relationship with someone, being able to ask someone for assistance, being able to connect with someone is free. And if you can build great relationships and be a part of a coalition and work across sectors, when you can understand that some of the issues that the disability community has when it comes to access to the ballot is the same issues that the Native American population has when it comes to access to the ballot, when it comes to the same issues that Black people have when it comes to access to the ballot, you can see that if you collaborate on something, that you can have a bigger impact, and that is free. So when there's no impact, when there's no money trickling in, there's still impact to be made, and the calendar is not going to slow down for any of us. Election day is still going to show up, and we're going to have something to show for it. So it's time to get to work, and it's time to get ready, because it is a midterm election year, and it's time to take action. So that will be my last word, and we hope to work in partnership with all of you all, and I look forward to seeing the impact you all can make. Thank you.
Well, the disability community managed to save the ACA in 2017. You're all welcome. And so when we save the election in 2022, you all can thank us again. And with that, I'm passing it back to Lillian.
This is Lillian. Great. Thanks so much. Let me make sure I spotlight myself. Great. Okay. Thank you so much to all of our speakers from that last session, from all of our sessions today. We have just a couple of minutes left. So what I would like to do is just introduce and pass the virtual mic over to Naomi Hess, who is an incoming health research associate at Mathematica. Naomi and I had a couple of times to chat over the last couple of years. She went through the American Association of People with Disabilities summer internship program and had a real interest in voting access, so much so that her kind of final big research paper for school was was focused on the disability vote. And so I'm excited for Naomi to just share a little bit about what's on her mind as she thinks about the disability vote this year. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Naomi.
Great, thank you so much, Lillian. Hi everyone, my name is Naomi Hess. I'm a white woman with brown hair and glasses, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a proud AAPD alumna from the 2020 and 2021 cohorts. I just graduated from Princeton University, where I majored in the School of Public and International Affairs with certificates in journalism and gender and sexuality studies. I'm an incoming health research associate at Mathematica. AAPD has helped motivate my interest in civic engagement. In the Disability Advocacy Certificate class in 2020, I collaborated with other interns to create an outline for a website dedicated to providing accurate information about voting accessibility. I also met with my Senator, Chris Van Hollen in Maryland, to advocate for his support for the Accessible Voting Act of 2020 as part of the requirements for the certificate. After a conversation, he signed on as a co-sponsor to the bill. These experiences show me the importance of creating partnerships with others, from my peers to legislators, in order to gain more support for voting rights. Unfortunately, 2 years later, there still has not been significant progress in improving voting accessibility. The speakers throughout the day today outlined some of the major barriers to voting that disabled voters still face. Recently, I had the opportunity to study this issue in depth through my senior thesis project entitled Expanded Access to the Polls, Disability and Voting Turnout in the 2020 Election. Throughout the last school year, I embarked on a journey to examine the accessibility of the 2020 election and what it can teach us for the future. I interviewed 18 disabled people who have a wide range of disabilities and live in a variety of states in order to learn about their voting experience in 2020. These interviews covered a wide range of topics, from the reasons why people vote to concerns about restrictions on voting to ideas for improving voting accessibility. I found that even though most of my interview subjects chose to vote by mail in 2020, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the majority of them prefer to vote in person in most typical elections. Many of the respondents discussed how voting in person allows them to show the public that disabled people are capable of political participation. Voting can be an act of political protest in itself. At the same time, the expansion of voting by mail led to improved accessibility for many of the voters I interviewed. Voting by mail allowed them to vote when it was most convenient for them and from the comfort of their own home. However, especially for voters with visual disabilities, voting by mail still presented with a variety of barriers. While I only interviewed 18 people, I think my results can be extrapolated to show that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to voting with a disability. Every voting method must be fully accessible so that disabled voters can choose how to vote based on their own needs and preferences. We must continue looking for ways to improve voting access to help the 18 people I talked to and the millions of other disabled voters wanting to be able to cast their ballot in an accessible manner. I ended my thesis with the following paragraph, which I wanted to share with you today. This thesis has shown the necessity of listening to disabled voters about their needs in order to expand access to the polls. Every person, regardless of disability, deserves a chance to participate in our American democracy. As states continue to pass new restrictions on voting, it will be even more important to look for access barriers and facilitate the removal so that disabled voters can exercise their right to vote as easily as possible. The best way to learn about potential barriers is by hearing from disabled voters themselves. Disabled people must advocate for themselves constantly in every sector of life so that they can receive proper accommodations. Therefore, they are well equipped to tell their stories and fight for what they need. Voting is one such way of advocating that must be protected. I really admire the work that all of you here are doing to improve voting access. In fact, I mentioned RevUp and last year's Disability Vote Summit in my thesis as examples of the growing movement to make voting more accessible. That is why it means so much to me to get to speak to you all today. As you continue fighting for voting access, I urge you to listen to people's stories, like I did in my thesis. The personal testimonies I gathered demonstrated that disabled people share a deep commitment to voting, and this commitment will remain strong in the years to come as disabled people continue to vote and fight for their rights. This Disability Vote Summit is helping to make sure that every disabled person can vote in an accessible manner. You are making a real difference with every action you take to advocate for new legislation, provide accessible information on voting, or even just encourage a peer to vote. Day 2 of the summit will continue these important discussions. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you all very much. And thank you, Naomi, for closing us out so beautifully. And thanks for everybody for attending day 1 of this Disability Vote Summit. And please join us tomorrow again at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. There's no need to register again. Just join on as you did today. And everyone, have a great evening.